Gibson and Kohli here with Snackable Health, and we are talking about those fitness trackers, and we're talking about how many steps a day do you need to stay healthy? So, what's the answer, pal?
I wish there was a magic number, but it's a little different for every person, I think is the bottom line. So that 10,000 number that we've all kind of glommed onto that we're so attached to, it's a good rough rule of thumb for most of us, but really it comes from an advertising campaign from an old Japanese pedometer company. So it's not really something that's been rooted in science. But since then, we've actually seen a number of different studies kind of published that have shown that the sweet spot appears to be somewhere between 8 to 12,000 steps for most of us. So, 8,600 or so is the newest study suggesting that that's kind of the right amount to prevent us from gaining weight. But if we add a couple of thousand steps to that every day, we can actually lose weight if we're overweight. And so the bottom line, Mike, ends up being it doesn't really matter exactly how many steps you take. You just have to expend more than you're putting in if you're trying to lose weight. And data tells us that if you move only 21 minutes every day, you can actually cut your chance of dying by about 30%. So very provocative
Wow.
and very easy
Wow.
to do, you know?
20 minutes a day. Wow. Well, time for me to take the dogs on more walks then. Are there any hazards to walking too many steps? I mean, is 14,000 bad?
Yeah, as you know, as a cardiologist, we see in our clinics all the time patients have a U-shaped relationship with exercise. So I see a lot of intense athletes here in Denver, Colorado, and a lot of them come to me because of arrhythmias or other cardiac problems. Because if you're really hitting activity a little too intensely, it can almost stress out your cardiovascular system and it starts to have more negative effects necessarily than positive ones. So I would say it's really important. More is not always better. You just need to have the right amount, and that right amount needs to be a bit of a sliding scale for you, depending on what you're eating, depending on what you're doing. So, as an example, whenever I'm traveling for conferences, like American Heart Association meeting is coming up, I generally don't tend to eat as healthy as I do when I'm at home. So I do my best to sort of use those few weeks to kind of balance out with more steps that I perhaps might have taken, when I was at home in my regular routine pattern. So the idea is just to be mindful, I think, of what you're doing and just to make sure you don't drop the ball on achieving at least that minimum number of activity, because we know that physical activity so important with respect to our risk of cancer, of heart disease, obesity, diabetes, all kinds of health problems.
Get moving, get started. Thanks for the tips, Pyle, and thanks to all of you for joining us here from Snackable Health.